walk us through your journey.
Yeah, and you know, Beth, it's not a linear route. It was a very circuitous route that got me to where I am. And in hindsight, I really see that there was a strong thread that ran through that. So it's interesting because I've had many roles in different industries. I've had a product development role in telecom. I've had corporate development roles in media companies, and then I became a CMO for the fashion and retail space, and now I'm heading up marketing at Blink Fitness in the health and wellness space. So definitely at first sort of blink or blush, one wouldn't notice what the thread is, but really the interesting thing that was happening as I took this journey through each of these industries and each of these roles, what was happening was they were being disrupted by technology. Telecom was being disrupted by itself with the mobile phone. So how do you turn around a business from landlines to mobile? The media was being disrupted by the democratization of journalism, and what did that mean for the traditional advertising structure? And then finally, obviously, in fashion and retail, we saw disruption on two sides. We saw it with DTC as well as supply chain. And right now, you know, really through this COVID period, what has happened to the health and wellness and fitness industry is it's really accelerated on the digital side. So really becoming an omni-channel offering with both the gym space or the retail space in addition to everything else that exists in the digital world.
So that is definitely not a traditional path. And when you and I we talked about the importance of, I don't know if it's taking the long way around, but not worrying that it doesn't look linear. Did you worry along the way? Were you ever sort of like, oh God, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it would only be natural for me to have moments of thinking that. And for sure, the first time in my MBA class, when I was the only creative person in the class, and everybody else, you know, didn't even need a calculator to turn on to do whatever equation it was, and I couldn't even figure out how to turn on the calculator. I was used to talking about chiaroscuro and watercolor, and here I was, you know, in a class talking about statistics, Michael Porter, et cetera. So it really, it gave me an edge. It made me realize that it was about learning vocabulary and understanding sort of the fundamentals of how to work cross functionally and how to think like a leader within each of those contexts. So I think it's only natural that sometimes people take a moment and question, you know, is this the right decision? Is this the right brand? Is this the right industry? Is this the right role?
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, I think, you know, the experiences that I've had have really led me to where I am right now.
So one of the through lines is e-commerce, and e-commerce is an increasingly important part of all of our worlds. But how does e-commerce play in your story? Both for those of you, I didn't give you a full introduction, but Michelle's also worked at some amazing retailers that many of us would be familiar with: Diane von Furstenberg, Ann Taylor Loft, among others. How has e-commerce played a role in the fashion industry and also at Blink?
Yeah, I think it's really the e-commerce really opens the idea of data and really understanding who your consumer is. And, you know, having that data is really gives you the opportunity to personalize your message, especially when you look at your key consumers. So I think that's really what's opened up a real role for sort of the future thinking CMO.
Interesting. So speaking of future thinking, you know, Blink Fitness is certainly about the traditional health aspect of working out and why you would do it, but it's also really focused on the mental aspect and what fitness can do for you mentally. The previous conversation, they were talking about mental health, and here we are again. So mental health and fitness seems sort of the moment, but that's not how, like, Blink didn't just discover this in the last
No.
11 months.
No, you're so right, Beth. And really that was what the birth of the brand. And I too, like you heard at the end of the conversation between Elise and Valerie, I love to hear that that's really how she, she finds her balance, or what we think is balance, or just kind of lets go of her day, is really through that vehicle of whether it's physical, some sort of physical outlet, or even meditation. And we as a brand, we were built on the idea that it's mood above muscle, right? So it's this whole idea about the mental state. And obviously, like you said, over the last almost a year, this idea of your mental state has become more and more important. And it's really how we think about meeting our members wherever they are, whether they're coming to the local gym or they're at home using our app. We provide them with that rejuvenation level, that idea that they can meditate, do yoga, do stretching content. And we see, very similar to the conversation that Elise and Valerie just had, that people are in real need for that mental release. And we see it by, how the completion rates of how much time people are spending on their app in that area of rejuvenation. So, and we believe that physical fitness, in the spirit of this sort of broad way of looking at the industry, that health and wellness is really the vital part, that we believe that this is really what physical fitness is all about. And you'll see that sort of as we move through this year, the causes that we're going to get behind and the things that we'll stand for around mental health.
Got it. Well, I will not ask you to commit.
No revealing yet.
I will not ask you to commit the active news, but we will stay tuned. So let's talk about the physical manifestation. I know people are not going into anywhere the way they used to, but how do you do mood over muscle in your physical locations? How do you bring that to life?
Yeah, I think that this idea about the space, the physical space of brands, is so important. And it's something really that I learned while I was at Ann Taylor Loft. And I really saw when we brought Lou and Gray to life. I was actually at the brand with Lou and Gray, and it was my team that created that brand experience, whether it was the brand experience online or in store. It was talented women like Cecilia Gates, Kendall Mead, and Allison Griffith that really put together this feeling of what physical space was going to look like. And it was really about community. So in this particular case for Lou and Gray, we were creating a place or a space for community where people could gather, where, women would gather to shop, to experience, but they could also see right above them in a loft, they could see the design team at work and interact. And the design team in reaction to that could interact and create this community with the people that we created the clothing for. And we went to great extents with the fitting room as well. It became a very haptic, tactile experience. We thought about the color, the fabrics, the way the dressing rooms were set up. They were oversized. There was a big community space in the center. And it was really all about people and sharing community space. And so in the spirit of that, similar but slightly different, is how we think about Blink Fitness and the way that the locations were designed. They were designed to feel upbeat, clean, and not intimidating, and most importantly, comfortable when they worked out. So every touch point that we do is specifically designed for people to feel comfortable. So from the moment that you walk into the gym, it's actually been designed to be non-intimidating and welcoming. So we actually have things like the cardio equipment is up front versus more of the heavy machinery in the back. It tends to intimidate people. So, and that really speaks to, I think, actually women and where they feel comfortable. We want to, focus on and encourage women to also experience things like the weight room and to feel comfortable. So it's a very thoughtful process that we've gone through to make people feel comfortable. And obviously, like what you said, Beth, and sort of the strategy of it. But now, obviously, during COVID, a lot of things have been done and created in order to, that we're aligned to CDC and local regulations so that people feel safe and comfortable. It's a touchless entry. You're able to see capacity before you come into the gym on our app. You're actually able to make a reservation, so you know exactly what time you'll be in the gym and potentially how many people will be in the gym with you. So a lot of thought has been put around that to make people feel comfortable in this time. And obviously they can use the app as they go through the experience.
Right. So you mentioned sort of two examples of building the environment to truly speak to uh, building the physical environment to truly speak to the consumer. What are some things that brands who have brick and mortar spaces or are considering brick and mortar spaces can do to particularly appeal to female consumers? Obviously, that was Lou and Gray, and I will not ask anyone on the web stream to raise their hand if they're wearing a Lou and Gray sweatshirt or sweatsuit, but I can basically guarantee someone is. But how do, like, based on what you know, and you've done this in two different industries, I mean, a cozy sweatsuit is pretty different than a barbell. How do brands build physical spaces that are attractive and engaging for women?
Yeah, I think it's really about, it's just another touch point, and it's really about understanding who, you know, who that audience is and what's authentic to the brand and to the audience. So I think it's this whole idea. You had asked me also before about this idea about e-commerce and data and how we understand, you know, how our target audience feels. I think it's really about thinking about how to create those positive spaces and taking into effect, you know, what would make your customer comfortable in that space. And you know, I think that there's a lot of talk right now about this idea about low touch experiences, right? Like we've seen it so far with, you know, grocery stores where you actually physically don't even have to go into the space. They come out and, you know, put it into your car. But I think a lot of retailers now are rethinking about what does that experience look like in store.
And do you think low touch or lower touch is here to stay? Is it something that you're really expecting that as people, particularly in the U.S. who have access to vaccines, get vaccinated, that the desire for that kind of experience, both digital and physical, will revert, or do you think we're here to stay and we're going to build on it?
Yeah, I think about that a lot, and you know, I've been involved with some different panels where there's been other industry representation from very high touch situations like airports with airlines and hotels with whether it's business or personal travel, and what does that world look like. There's definitely been a shift in health and wellness and how we think about sort of safety and interaction with strangers. So I think it's, you know, TBD, so to speak. But when you look at, you know, the Asian culture, you know, that, you know, that I'm sure people have noticed that you know, that a mask was a way of being very respectful and thinking about, you know, if you're not feeling personally well, about thinking about the community of people or the community of strangers that you're traveling with. So it'll be interesting to see, one, how industries are going to react to that. There was a lot of talk on a panel that I participated in about this idea of low touch, about how people, you know, want to be able to go in and out of travel, whether it's the train or the plane, and not have any touch and interaction and use their telephone. And what does that look like for both business and personal travel? So I think it's TBD, but I do believe it's something that companies are looking very closely at.
Well, when
What
you
have you seen though, Beth? Because I know that, you know, you see a lot from your
yeah.
purview as well.
So the companies that are part of Stagwell's portfolio are by and large digital marketers and digital creators. And what we're seeing is companies coming to us to transform what was a pretty traditional physical space, and I think it's probably 50-50, companies who had a plan to be more digital, that was an 18 or a 24-month plan. Now it's a 2-month or a 6-month plan. Particularly our team at Code and Theory, which builds digital experiences and digital platforms for a lot of the biggest brands in the world, they really don't think people are going to go back. Once you can bank entirely, online, once you can interact with your healthcare provider, just think about when you you used to walk into a doctor's office and get a physical clipboard and, fill out 15 pages of information. That's not happening by necessity now, and I can't imagine people will want to go back to that.
Yeah.
Same with the sort of digital experience that we're having right now. I
Yeah.
think events have changed forever. Not that live events aren't coming back. I am kind of looking forward to the Roaring 20s, which I think we're supposed, or 22s maybe, that we're going to have. But most of our companies are really seeing the changes here, and the change is not going away.
Yeah, I think this acceleration towards digital and different interfaces, I think without a doubt. I mean, certainly, the fitness industry, we've seen that the percentage, I think it was My Body that talked about, like something like 79% of people were live streaming some sort of physical fitness during this period, from when COVID had hit. So you see that, and absolutely we're seeing it in things like telehealth and what does the
Mhm.
future of medicine look like. So I
Well,
think
so
there's definitely exciting times ahead in this digital acceleration, and I'm sure you certainly see that from where you're sitting as well.
we do, and it's exciting. And I think a lot of projects that companies maybe didn't have the um, internal shove to do, or getting stakeholders aligned. Never let a good crisis go to waste, I think is the phrase here.
Yeah. I
Um,
think, and I think also this culture of agility, which I think it sounds like a lot of your agencies are experiencing. We certainly saw it at Blink Fitness. We had no plans to launch 4 new products that were integrated into the app, but we also knew that health and wellness and safety was utmost. So how could we make this a frictionless experience for our Blink members, reducing the amount of touch that they had to do, allowing them to have, a view into how busy a gym was, and
mhm.
obviously reservations. So, I mean, we did that in a very short window. Like you said, this was something people would talk about over a 12 to 15 month period. And we did
Yeah.
it in less than, 6 weeks. So, there's certainly a lot of, I guess, of positive that in that way, in the spirit of sort of agile thinking and integration of these products and services.
If you invent a touchless barbell, I think that will also be very popular. Uh, and I do want to confirm, I have at least one audience member, Rachel Kingsley, who's joining us from Texas and is wearing blue and gray right
I
now.
love it. I
So
love it.
my guess was correct. So let's take a step back to
For sure.
to e-commerce. Um, do you think that e-commerce gives companies a better understanding of their consumers, and particularly their female consumers? And if so, how, and maybe a way that you've used data to inform what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think without a doubt that the way that behavior that exists online, it certainly tells a brand a full story, and gives a very clear understanding about their audience and how they're behaving. And I think that it's definitely an advantage for a brand. It gives them the opportunity to understand and to acknowledge that there's diverse lifestyles and passions, and how does that all tie together. So I think, from a brand perspective, we've obviously getting a lot more thoughtful about the content we're creating, the advertising, where we're doing it, the social media, and even customer care. So we're really looking at it, and this data really allows us to give a holistic experience, whether that's, shopping, but in this
Mhm.
case, it's really about the member experience from a fitness perspective. So
Is there
um,
something that you've learned from the data in the past, either during COVID or before, that's sort of fundamentally changed your social media, your advertising, any of those communication channels that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's a lot around content strategy, actually. So that obviously impacts content creation and a lot of our UGC strategy that we're doing. So I think during this, we saw that, like a little bit about what we talked about about the beginning, about that importance for the mental break. So what kind of content were people dipping into in the app? One, we saw obviously a lift in how people were using the app and how they were using the app. So that definitely gave us, direction for future state as well for content and additional content. But we also got a sense of what people needed are needing during this time period. And I think a lot of time is spent on the social channels and UGC. I think people are craving stories about other people, about how they're getting through the pandemic, how they're using fitness to get through the pandemic. And we've adopted a lot of this thought to how we use our micro influencers. I can give an example if that's helpful.
Yes.
One of our one of our gym members actually in New York City is an essential worker. She's actually a nurse at a hospital. And she has, really reached out to us and spoken a lot about how physical fitness has really helped us, that mental state, again, like what Elise and Valerie were talking about, it helped her. And unfortunately, she was one of the early medical care nurses to get COVID-19. And she talked a lot about how this her gym experience, whether it was with the app or once the gym opened again, got her to wellness a lot quicker. And the interesting part and sort of the happy side of the story is she's actually one of Time's most influential people during this time period. She was on the cover of Time. We call her Nurse Amy, and she's become a really important story in what we're trying to do around the community, to make people feel well and to help also people understand how important the physical part can be for the mental part as well. So, those are just one of many stories that we're trying to highlight about this member experience. And we get that from the data and from the stories that people are telling us.
It's an amazing time to be alive when that kind of interaction is possible, easy, and really important to brands. It's not something we're tacking on at the end. It's where brand interaction can often start. I'm switching gears a little bit. You're thinking about people who are inspiring, like Nurse Amy.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about people who've inspired you. Who was a great boss for you, and more important than who, why?
Yeah, I feel like, just sort of my mindset about interacting, I think, or maybe just being a parent, you can't pick favorites, you learn something from everybody. And I also feel very blessed that along my journey, I've had some really incredible people. But in the spirit of the talk that we're having, there were two women bosses, managers that had a profound impact on my life. And the first one was when I was at Thomson Reuters, when I was the chief of staff. Her name is Leanne Daly, and she taught me the ultimate way of storytelling, about marrying this idea, now what we call omni-channel, but offline and online, and really bringing people on a journey. And she inspired me just as a woman. She was the CMO at ESPN and really put ESPN on the map. And here I was working for this incredibly creative and inspirational person that really had changed a brand. So I learned a lot from her just in the spirit of storytelling. And then the second person was actually who I worked with at Ann Taylor Loft. I worked for with Lou and Gray. She's now the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, Fran Horowitz, and she's not related to me, but she had a profound impact on me about how I thought about leadership, mentoring people. And she, and to this day is still a really big mentor and an important person in my life.
So let's talk a little bit about mentorship, and we'll talk about it in the office, but one of the things I know you're involved with is angel investing, which is a very special kind of mentorship, and not one that many women are involved with. I was part of an angel group for a while, and I'm curious what brought you to angel investing. How do you work with founders? And I'd love to hear where you think marketing fits in the angel journey.
Yeah.
But let's start at the beginning. How did you get interested in angel investing, and how do you do it?
Yeah. I think it was partly sort of a repercussion or a fallout from this idea that I didn't take a, that I took a circuitous route on my journey to where I am now. And being very involved with technology, I had access to a lot of interesting people that were building very interesting companies that were obviously disrupting or helping companies through this period of disruption. And it really, I hate to make it so simplistic, but it really happened by accident that I started doing it. There's a lot of incredible organizations that you can participate in, which it sounds like you have, um, you know, uh, but this I actually did on my own, was just really through mentoring people and having interactions with people. And when they did come to me about specifically like what you had touched on, marketing advice, before I knew it, I was advising companies. And then before I knew it, I was investing in companies. So I don't think it was as strategic as one might perhaps go on this journey, but I think that's how it came to be. And for me, really, that I usually invest in people more than I actually invest necessarily in ideas. And I feel very lucky with some of the decisions I've made. I've invested in an incredible woman, Rachel Tipograph, who started a company called Micmac. And it continues to grow today, and she's really revolutionizing how we think about marketing, and certainly video and marketing. So that's really how it came to be. But I do think often, like what you touched on too in this question, is marketing sort of the last component of the investment process that one thinks about or considers as they're building a brand and a business. So
Yeah, I mean, certainly Micmac has had an incredible rise, and very excited to see where it goes. Are there, and don't name names, but are there any ideas that you thought, oh well, that's really going to work, and it just didn't? And how did you deal with? I mean, how did you deal with helping that founder or that company through maybe it didn't work the way they thought they were going to?
yeah. I do some mentorship with XRC, which came out of the Parsons School when I was an adjunct professor there. That's how I first got introduced to them. And I think a lot of what they learn as they go through these experiences is having to pivot, right? And having to like assess the current strategy and where the opportunity is. I Micmac is an example of, she did pivot from where she initially started to where she
Mhm.
is now. If you looked at the business plan that she started with where she's going now is very different. So and I think timing is a lot of it too, right? Like market timing and whether it makes sense. So doesn't mean it's not a great idea. It just might not be right in the moment it is necessarily relevant or ready for adoption.
Yeah, I think timing is critical, and sometimes you ride the wave, and sometimes you you just get under the wave and you have to wait for it to pass.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so, I mean, how do you feel like your experience as a marketer helps you be an investor and be a mentor to people?
Yeah. Um, that's a we're going to unpack that question because
Yeah,
there's so
well,
many
go
different
ahead.
layers. At the end of the day, like, maybe it's the Canadian in me, but Peter Drucker always talked about, that business really comes down to the customer, right? And that's our job as a marketer, is really to, identify the customer and, begin that process, leading towards profitable growth, so to speak. So that's how I think about that part of the equation, is certainly the first part of your question. And ask me again sort of about the mentoring part. Sorry.
Well, I'm curious about how the lessons you've learned allow you or help you to be a mentor. I mean, you talked about storytelling as a skill you got from, or a skill you honed with a particular boss. You've started brands, and I mean, most founders, Stagwell invests in marketing services agencies, and the vast majority of the people we invest in are founders, and it's their first company, it's their best company, it's their true love. But they've, it's their first time doing this sort of a process, whereas you've started a lot of brands, you've marketed in a number of different spaces. So I was curious how that diversity of experience helps you mentor, I guess, both as an angel investor and also, I would imagine, in your normal, in real life.
Yeah, and it's, it really came to light for me actually when I was an adjunct professor at Parsons, and I created a course for people that were entrepreneurial and wanted to not necessarily join and become designers within a company, but had an idea about how to start a company themselves. And I think that sort of marries up to the question that you're asking, right? About how do you mentor the individual as well as the concept or the idea for that. So, I believe that, that my experiences could be very helpful in the next person's journey. So how can I help somebody and mentor them no matter where they are, whether they're in a company and they're on my team, how do I grow them and take them to the place where they're doing the best work that they've done? And the same goes to somebody like a student or an individual that I'm helping them, on this journey through life. After the course was completed at Parsons, I spent a lot of time placing my students, making introductions, giving them the opportunity to have a chance to move into professional. And I still continue to mentor a lot of them today. So I think it's part of the process. I think it's part of the leadership process. I certainly feel it both at leading my current team, but as well as the people and lives that I've touched through this journey. So, and the same goes for, the perspective that I bring to some of these angel investments that I do, or advisory roles that I have. It's how could my learnings and experiences help them expedite wherever that they need to go to reach their North Star, whether it's as a business or an individual.
So how, one of the things that I noticed with my kids who are little, but they get to take cool classes at school or in their homeschool pod, as the case may be. But, as professionals, we often, I don't want to say stop learning, but we don't have the formal learning environments. We don't, you did your MBA earlier in your career. I did my master's a long time ago at this stage. How do you keep learning? Do you take courses? Do you listen to podcasts? I know some companies give sabbaticals where people can go do that, but how do you do it both sort of one-off, and then if you do it more formally, what do you do?
Yeah. I'm actually still in school. I'm actually enrolled in a program at Harvard on data analytics.
Well, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's actually an amazing program. It's a collaboration between 3 schools at Harvard, between their business school, their engineering school, and their arts and science, which really tells you a lot about where data is going. And I think it harkens back to that question that you asked about e-commerce, right? How do those 3 functions or those 3 worlds kind of collide? So I'm a super curious person. So I continue to sort of learn and grow through these formal programs, like the certificate course that I'm doing. But I also think through this mentoring process, it also keeps me fresh and keeps me sort of growing as both an individual and as a leader.
Well, the Harvard program sounds like someone else figured out the combination pack that you had to execute between art history and MBA, and put it together in a perhaps slightly more consumable way for others.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to you about that too. I know that, coming from the agency that you do and now joining a combination family, which I'd love to hear more about. You talk a lot about art and science, and it's so funny because it's a line, on my resume that I have this ability to mix, whether it's the left and right side of my brain, but that art and science. And I'm asking, that's the question I have for you, but in kind of going back and asking what you did what you asked me about thinking about the art and science of
Mhm.
how we think about, we do it when we're doing e-commerce, it's that creativity and the science side of things. And we do it when we're mentoring, right? It's
Yeah.
the soft and the analytic, I guess, side of things. So I'd love to hear your perspective, because that's what I believe
Yeah.
your agency stands for. So tell me more about what you're experiencing.
Sure. So Stagwell Group is a private equity firm. We invest in marketing services companies, and by that we mean any sort of effort that a modern CMO would hire. And I use modern deliberately because I think what being a CMO means today is very different than what it meant uh, certainly 5 years ago, absolutely 10 years ago. And our motto, we're about 5 years old, we've made about 30 investments, is that we're investing in the art and science of creativity. We're not all data heads or all creatives. As I say to my kids, there's never one answer. It is not only one person's fault or one person's opportunity. And our most recent announced investment is a combination with MDC Partners, which is known as the place where great talent lives and home to some amazing advertising agencies like Anomaly, 72 and Sunny, Forsman Bowden Fours, and some not traditional advertisement digital services companies like Instrument and YML. And as we're hopefully moving toward an SEC sanctioned combination, we're talking about this as a marriage between talent and technology. And what the combination of talent and technology can do for marketers. What platforms can we build to allow us to collaborate? What platforms can we use technologically to bring our creativity to life? And not sort of thinking that we're going to start with creativity and then figure out how to deliver it, digital as a tactic, or saying that, we're going to start with digital and then we're just, going to dump a bunch of creative in at the end. We really feel that bringing the two groups together will provide us with the ability to do amazing work for our clients. And in full disclosure, one of our companies does work with Blink, so I should share that with the audience. And it's an exciting opportunity to have about 9,000 marketers around the world in, I think it's 24 countries, maybe 25 by now. But to get to work with brands and organizations that are making a change, that are going to new places, that are interested in doing things a little bit differently, and how we can bring our talent and our technology to bear for them. So it's a very exciting time in the midst of COVID and so much uncertainty. We're excited about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a silver lining, right, from the whole experience.
Exactly.
But I love what you're saying too, in just sort of the spirit of sort of that art and science, and thinking about the opportunity to continue to learn and grow. I think that people sometimes navigate towards the marketing function and sort of focus on one side, whether it's the creative side or the data side. But some of the people that I've worked with that are sort of make the magic and really are able to not necessarily think of each one in a silo, but bring those two together. So you might have a proclivity towards one, but I think really it's really the marriage of both, no matter what your role is. I think in a marketing or e-commerce function, I think it really serves the individual really well.
I agree. And I think some of us who are, and I'm in the financial services industry now, which I never in a million years expected to be in. But the opportunity to watch how a really integrated client team comes together. Everyone is playing a different part in that talent and technology conversation, and no one is just playing one note on the piano. So I see Ariel is back, which makes me think that we have run out of time.
Thank you guys both so much. I love the conversation of art and science. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So thank you for giving your time to our community and giving such a valuable conversation to everyone listening in.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
Beth. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
So with that, it was a great day of speakers. We're super excited to have you all join today for our Women in Marketing. We also hope you join us tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time for one of our favorite summit, C-Suite and Marketing Leadership. We'll be joined by leaders and CMOs from the New York Times, PayPal, IBM, Quicken Loans, and many more. Thank you for joining, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.